Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you all. Tonight, in tonight's class, we're going to continue our series on soulmates, on what makes a Jewish marriage. And the topic that we will explore tonight is, what is that key ingredient that makes for a successful marriage? Now, of course, there are countless books written on this topic. There are many, many opinions. Everyone could say what they believe the key ingredient is in a successful marriage. But we will explore this question from Judaism's perspective. And as we mentioned in the beginning of the series, that when we explore an issue from the Torah perspective, we're gaining insight from the one who created men and women in the first place and know us best. So, what does Judaism, what does God tell us is the key ingredient to marriage? What will make men and women live together in the most successful way? And once we identify this key element, we'll speak about how to implement that in our marriage and how to work on our marriage from that perspective. But we're not quite ready to begin yet. Before we begin to explore how to improve a marriage, we need to make sure that we have the right approach, the right attitude. Because if we are missing the right approach to our marriage, it will be very difficult to successfully implement change. So to begin with, I'd like you to please turn to text 1A on page 89. Perhaps those that don't have books could just share with someone next to them. Maybe we might even have to rearrange seats a bit. I don't know, whatever works best. Now, text 1A is a quote from the Talmud. And it is what seems like a question posed to a groom on his wedding day. And it goes like this. In Israel, when a man married a woman, they would tell him, matzah or motzeh, which means, have you found or do you find? Now, what is that supposed to mean exactly? He's about to get married. It's his wedding day. And this is the question posed to him. Have you found or do you find? Found what? Find what? What is being asked here? Now, the truth is, if we look a little bit closer, he's not being asked something. He's being told something. Because in fact, matzah and motzeh, have you found or do you find, are really code words, code terms, so to speak, for two possible scenarios, two possible pictures his upcoming marriage may look like. His marriage might take on the form of, have you found? Or it might take on what's represented in the term, do you find? What are those two scenarios? So the Talmud goes on to explain that have you found is a reference to a happy, contented marriage. Do you find is a reference to a marriage that, as the Talmud quotes from King Solomon, describes it as more bitter than death. So pretty miserable. Now, why do those terms refer to those two specific scenarios? Somebody who is in finding mode in their marriage, when they get married or throughout the marriage, means that they never truly completed their search for their spouse. She is still not completely satisfied with who her spouse is. So she's still finding. And this can be on many levels. This could be in terms of always comparing one spouse to the spouse of others. It's not quite measuring up. He doesn't do what my friend's husband does. He doesn't wash the dishes, and he does, or whatever it is, always comparing. It could be a constant critique, being constantly judgmental of one's spouse, never finding that he is meeting your needs, meeting your expectations. Still on the look, still on the search for that elusive, perfect husband. And of course, this indicates a real lack of commitment to the marriage, because you still haven't accepted him completely. That's do you find, or are you finding? Are you in finding mode in your marriage? As opposed to, have you found? Somebody who approaches their marriage from that perspective, they're in found mode. They finish their search. She accepts her husband for who she is. That's it. She married him. She's committed to him. She'll take the whole package, good and bad together. That's it. That's who her husband is. She accepts him. She's committed to him no matter what. There's no more looking back. Well, what if? Not like this one, not like that one, could be better. There's no more looking back. There's only looking forward. Now imagine someone in finding mode looking to improve their marriage versus someone in found mode looking to improve their marriage. Someone who's in finding mode probably won't have too much success improving their marriage, and that's why the Talmud tells us if your marriage is going to take on the look of finding, it will be miserable. You'll never be happy. And anything you try, if you're coming from a place of criticism and negativity, it's probably not going to work. But if you're in found mode in your marriage, if you are approaching your marriage from the place of, I have already found, then you're ready to move on, to look forward, to begin to build a thriving, flourishing marriage. And that is a happy marriage, a contented marriage. So before we begin to explore what that key ingredient to successful marriage is, and before we begin to discuss how to implement that, we have to be clear on two things first. That if we are sometimes find ourselves, which we're human and we probably have our finding days and our found days, but we should just know that if we are in finding mode, it's not the time to try and work on a marriage. There's really nothing to talk about. You're not likely to be too successful. If we are in found mode, however, then it's time to begin. That's number one. Number one is to be aware there's two ways to approach and determine we have the right one. The second point we need to clarify before we begin is, now that we know the right attitude to have, we need to constantly assess if we have that attitude. In other words, the question the Talmud is speaking about, or the declaration that's presented to a groom, have you found or do you find? This is a question we need to ask ourselves every single day. Am I in finding mode or am I in found mode? Because the success of my marriage depends on my attitude. And with that, we can begin to explore how to improve our marriage. So, what would you say is the key ingredient to a successful marriage?
Respect.
Respect. Beautiful. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit, or leave it at that?
Well, to me, respect would just sort of be like the groundwork, you know what I mean? To me, if you don't have that, you don't really have a lot. I mean, out of that comes, in my opinion, trust and all those things.
Okay, beautifully said, and we are definitely going to elaborate on that. Good.
I think along the same lines, like accepting each other for who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, like ideally, like more than accepting, but I think just like a basic foundation of like I accept you for everything that you are,
Mm-hmm.
and not wanting to change each other.
Okay, beautiful. And that ties in actually very nicely with what Sue mentioned, and we're going to discuss that as well. Okay, so we have respect, acceptance. Any other thoughts?
Communication.
Communication. Very important. Good. Commitment. Yes. It's pretty essential. 100%. Okay, tonight we're actually going to address this question according to Maimonides, the Rambam. And if you're wondering why we're choosing Maimonides out of all the Torah scholars through the ages, it's actually very interesting because Maimonides, amongst the many books that he authored, he put together a series of 14 books called the Mishneh Torah. And the Mishneh Torah encompasses every facet of Jewish life and every aspect of Jewish law. And what the Rambam did, what Maimonides did, was he compiled all the sources from our oral tradition. So all the sources from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from the Midrash, and all the different commentaries on the Talmud and on the Midrash, etc., etc. All that preceded him. He synthesized all that wisdom into his 14 volumes of the Mishneh Torah. So in the section of his book where he speaks about marriage, really that is a synthesis of all the marriage advice found in the Mishnah and the Talmud and in the Midrash and all the different sources that came before Maimonides. So instead of us having to sift through each source, it makes sense to open up the Mishneh Torah, the book of Maimonides, where he has already done that work for us, so to speak, and compiled all that wisdom. So we are going to start with that source, with the text from Maimonides, and discover what kind of advice he gives to have a successful marriage. So take a look in your books, please, on page 90. You have a little exercise there. You have a chart. And on this chart across the top, you have 3 different ingredients that Maimonides discusses is important in a marriage. And along the side, we have we have those 3 ingredients in the context of a husband behaving towards his wife, and then in the context of a wife behaving towards her husband. What I'm going to ask you to do now is just to take a moment and to rate from 1 to 3 those different ingredients in the relationship of a husband towards his wife and a wife towards his husband, 1 being the most important, 3 being the least important. And I have the same chart here in big, so I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you. And we will build the chart, and then as a surprise at the end, I'll tell you how the Rambam would fill in the chart. Okay? And we'll see what different ideas we get. So go ahead.
Those were in Hebrew.
Which words?
Did you use those terms? Like, what would reverence be in Hebrew?
Oh.
In his text.
Okay, you know what? We could look it up actually. Let's see how in the words of Rambam. I'm not doing the text inside, but it's there in your student books if you wish to look it up. Oh, it's here on the same page actually. So, love is ahava. Respect or honor, we're actually going to be using those terms interchangeably tonight, would be kavod. And reverence would be, the word that Maimonides uses here is mora, kind of like awe. I think I would translate or describe reverence as a feeling of admiration. All right, anybody ready to share some thoughts here? Be shy. Every answer is a good answer. Can't go wrong.
I wasn't sure about reverence, but I feel like men, wife towards husband is more love, and husband towards wife is more, like, I feel like women want to be respected and men want to be loved.
Okay, so when it comes to the husband towards the wife, you're saying number one ingredient would be?
Honor.
Would be honor. Okay. And then next? Between love and reverence, or love and admiration.
Maybe love, I don't know.
Love? Okay. So we're just
Yeah.
doing some possible scenarios here. Like I said, it can't go wrong. Okay, and then I guess reverence would be number 3. Okay. And
Wife
what would you
towards
put here?
husband, I think love, then reverence, then honor.
okay, so first and foremost, you're saying the husband needs love, then he needs reverence, and then he needs honor. Okay.
I don't know.
Anybody get anything different? Hala?
I kind of got the respect or honor equally as number 2.
In which direction of the relationship?
So for both of them, it would be number 2.
Sorry, which would be number 2?
So
The
this,
honor,
Oh, the honor would be number 2 in both cases.
yeah.
Okay.
And then I thought that the husband to the wife, the number 1 needs to be love, because I don't think it comes naturally to them.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, that's a very interesting point.
And I think, and then reverence is 3. of
And
course.
reverence would be 3. So love doesn't come naturally to the husband, so you would put love as number 1. Would you also say that love is the number 1 need of the wife?
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
And then the opposite for the women towards men. So I think men need reverence and admiration the most.
Okay.
And the love comes naturally to women because they're, you know, the whole story with Chava and Adam. Like, we're part of them anyway. So, like, we need to work on that.
It's
I
also
think
our
that's-
wiring. We have that
Yeah.
emotional intuition a little bit more,
Yeah.
maybe, in many ways.
So, not to say that it's not important, it's just not.
We don't need to work on it as much, perhaps. We don't need to be instructed to love.
Yeah.
Okay, very good point. Anyone want to add, change, say something else? Or do you want to hear how we could fill this out according to the Rambam? Yeah, ready? Okay. Well, according to the Rambam, let's take these all off first and start anew. You all had wonderful, wonderful thoughts. So thank you for sharing them. Like I said, there's so many different answers as to what the main ingredient in marriage. We're looking from Judaism's perspective, and specifically from Maimonides tonight. So, a husband towards the wife. What would the wife's number 1 need be? What's the primary instruction to the husband regarding his wife, according to Maimonides? Honor or respect. They're interchangeable. Second need from the husband to the wife, or the wife's need that needs to be provided by the husband, would be love, according to Rambam. And the other way around, what does the husband need most, according to Rambam? Also respect. What is the second need of a husband, of a husband that the wife needs to provide? Reverence. And interestingly enough, when it comes to the husband towards his wife, Rambam doesn't even mention reverence. It's not even on the radar. And when it comes to the relationship from the wife towards the husband, Rambam doesn't even mention love. And Ayala, possibly the reason for that is, as you said, a woman does not need to be instructed to love her husband. It comes pretty naturally. So that's not even on the list of instructions that Rambam gives to the wife. Now, looking at this chart, according to Maimonides, I think we could extrapolate a few principles. Number 1, both the husband and the wife individually have a responsibility towards their marriage. The Rambam, first, he doesn't instruct them in general as a couple, He instructs the husband, you need to do this for your wife. You have an individual responsibility. And then he instructs the wife, you also have an individual responsibility to your marriage. You need to do, if you want a successful marriage, this is what you need to do. That's number one. Number two, it's interesting to see how the Rambam says very clearly that the husband and wife don't necessarily have the same needs. We each get customized instructions here. We're not told to do the same thing. And thirdly, and this is something I really want to spend some time focusing on, is that the Rambam tells us that the primary need of both the husband and the wife is, as you said before, Sue, respect. That's number one. Okay? So far, so good? Okay. But I would like to ask you all a question. What about love? Doesn't the saying go that love conquers all? That if a couple loves each other, that no matter what happens, what comes their way, whatever struggles and obstacles they have to go through in their marriage, if they love each other, they'll be able to prevail? Yet, according to Maimonides, it's not the number one key ingredient. It's respect that's number one. Not love at all. In fact, we don't even have love on the radar here when we talk about the husband's needs from the wife's obligations towards the husband. What happened to love? So I'm going to ask you to take a look at text 3, please. And just skim it quickly to yourself. We're not going to actually do this one aloud. Just gives us a general idea, the place of love in a relationship, according to this particular author, the famous book, The 5 Love Languages. Okay, he claims that the feeling of being in love that a couple experiences when they first get married will, pretty much guaranteed, diminish and fade. It will eventually fade. Exactly. Why? There's a few reasons. First of all, you can't really fall into a real relationship. When somebody falls in love, it means that it wasn't a choice, it wasn't a conscious decision, and there was no effort put into that decision. You can't really create a serious, real relationship, a relationship with depth that you just fall into, that happens automatically without making a conscious decision about it. So a relationship cannot be based on, a stable, lasting relationship at least, cannot be based on just falling into it, which is why it generally doesn't last. Additionally, when you hear someone in love talking, some common sentiments that you hear are like, he makes me so happy, he makes me feel so good about myself, he's really good to me. What does that all indicate about being in love feeling?
Selfish.
There's an element of self. There's a very strong element of self-love. There's a very big me in there. I feel good that he loves me. I feel good with this love. Now, is that a problem?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is, you're right, you're saying sometimes it depends. That's very true, because the truth is, it's very normal. It's human nature that in a relationship built on love, there's always the me in there. In fact, I'd like to read text 5 together with you. Text 5 is a quote from the author, the brilliant Talmudist, author, philosopher. You might have heard of him, Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz. And he is elaborating on a fundamental Hasidic text by one of the Chabad Rebbes. And he explains it as the following. In every I love you, whoever or whatever the love and the you are, there is always an I. A self must always be involved in the process. The emotion of love cannot exist without a self. Even when the love requires great self-denial, it still requires a self at the center of the emotion. It is impossible for the love to be entirely devoid of self, because somebody has to be the carrier, the feeler of the emotion. So, putting aside is this good, is this bad, it's a fact. It's reality. There is no such thing as selfless love. There's just no such thing. No matter how strong your love is, no matter how devoted you may be because you love him so much, no matter what you're willing to sacrifice because you love him so much, at the end of the day, there is a me, an I who loves. So while love is very, very important in a marriage, we're not putting it down at all. It's something that's unique to the relationship between a husband and a wife. It's the passion, it's the spark that makes a marriage special, that motivates the marriage in a way. Nonetheless, it won't work as a foundation to the marriage. And for a few reasons. First of all, what could easily happen when we love somebody so much is we want the best for that person. Well, that might be what I think is best for that person. And what sometimes happens as a result of such strong love is that I don't let my spouse breathe. I don't give him any space. I make all the decisions for him because I know what's best for him. I love him so much I can't bear to see him do the wrong thing. And it smothers, it's intrusive. That's one thing. Another thing is when your relationship is built only on love, it's not so easy to see your spouse's point of view in an argument. Because number one, as we said before, love doesn't focus so much on the other. It's about how I feel. I'm a little bit subjective. And number two, when having an argument, a time of tension, that love is not obvious. You don't really feel it. So it's very hard to see things from your spouse's perspective. And thirdly, you can't really build a lasting, stable relationship based on feeling, based on love, because it fluctuates. As we read, right? Love sometimes fades, at least the initial love. Hopefully through the marriage, the goal is to build a stronger love. But even feelings are more strong one day, less strong another day. It's very hard to have a stable, healthy relationship like that. So while love is crucial to a relationship, it cannot be the foundation. What should be the foundation? Going back to Maimonides, the foundation needs to be respect. What's the difference between love and respect? Rivka, you want to say something?
Giving, not taking.
Okay. Very interesting point, Rivka, and we're going to get to that. Why would you say, or why would you associate respect with giving? Because you're right. There is a connection.
I'm not sure why I do it. I always have thought that way.
Intuitively. Okay, great. So we're actually going to put that into words in this class. We'll get there soon.
I think it's a giving to place to live somebody, like make yourself a little bit less and give space to somebody.
Mm-hmm. So less of me in the relation, less focus, I should say, on me, and more focus on him, on the other person. Okay, good, beautiful.
What was the question? What's the difference between?
The difference between love and respect. In other words, why is respect a great foundation as opposed to love?
think giving. Oh, sorry. Go
No,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think giving is like the effect of respect. I think that respect is just less. It's not so much. It's not an emotion, and it's not fleeting in that way. It's like the way you perceive and really like evaluate someone. So I think in that way it's constant. You know what I mean? It's like you just sort of have a way that you perceive someone that assumes that you'll treat them a certain way.
So love being an emotion is by definition pretty subjective. Because as we read in this text, an emotion has to be felt by somebody. So it's pretty subjective.
Right.
And you're saying respect is not an emotion, it's a way of looking at somebody else and perceiving
Right.
them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even if you're, you know what I mean? And I think also love, you just don't have access to it if you're not in a loving mood.
Right.
So,
Emotions fluctuate
you
a
know
bit.
what I mean? Or someone's doing something that doesn't trigger love for you.
Right.
But I think if you respect them, it sort of doesn't matter. You just, there's a way that you treat them no matter what.
Well said.
That's good.
Well said.
That's very good.
So if I could put it like this, love is subjective. It's about how I feel and the benefits it gives me. Whereas respect is objective. It's about the other. In other words, no matter what benefits I get or I don't get, this person inherently deserves my respect. It has nothing to do with what I'm going to gain out of the relationship. Love, I need to gain out of the relationship in order to feel loved. It has to go both ways. I love and I have to feel loved in return. But respect, it's not about the benefits. It's not about the gain. It's about that person. It's about my spouse himself. He inherently, as a person, deserves respect. I don't really come into that equation. And therefore, we find that it's the respect in the relationship that will actually guide the love. So the love can be present in the relationship in a healthy way. So going back to the 3 points we said before, and actually, Ariella, you touched on these points a bit, is that we mentioned that, and I think, Valentina, you mentioned this as well, that if we have a foundation of only love, it's very hard to give our spouse the space that they need. Whereas if we have the attitude of respect, this person inherently deserves respect. I respect him for who he is. I respect his decisions. I respect his space. No matter how strong my love is, if it's guided by respect, then even if I think this is the best thing for him, overall, overriding that is my respect, and I'll give him his space. I'll trust him to make good decisions because I respect him. And in terms of seeing the other point of view, if the foundation is respect, above all, I respect my husband, then even if I don't necessarily agree with him, I'm objective enough to know that his opinion deserves respect too, his point of view deserves respect too, because I respect him. It's not about me.
I like the way you ally respect and trust.
And we're going to get to that also,
Very good.
especially when it comes to the husband. Those two need to go hand in hand, and we're going to get there soon. And then, of course, in order to build a stable relationship, like we said before, love fluctuates, but respect, it's for the person himself, it's for my spouse himself. That's not going to change. If he deserves respect, he deserves respect. And if I develop that attitude, and I know he deserves that respect, then that's how it is. That's the reality. That's the fact. That's not going to change. So we see that a foundation of love, a marriage that's built only on feelings of love between the couple, it's a pretty crumbly foundation. The love needs to sit on top of a base of respect. And perhaps we could put it this way, a little metaphor. Anyone could cook potatoes. You just need to, either put them in a pot of water or you just stick them in the oven. It's not too hard to do. But the question is, I know I probably was one of those people once, but you can't really ruin it too badly as long as you keep an eye on it, right? So, but how tasty is it? I might not eat it because it's attractive to me. It's not necessarily tempting me. I would eat it if I was hungry. It fills me up. What would make the potatoes a little bit more tempting, a little bit more attractive?
Toppings.
Any chefs there? I'm not much of that myself. Some toppings, okay. Some spice perhaps. Salt, pepper, make fries out of them, fry it in oil. Right, so if you add a little bit of oil, a little bit of spice, some yummy toppings, then even if I'm not hungry, I might still want to eat them, right? It just makes it more attractive. But if I put the potatoes aside, because I found them kind of bland, and I just what am I left with? I'm left with a pile of spices, or a pile of toppings, or a little bit of oil. And that will not do its job. That will not fill me up. That's not a meal. I'm still going to be hungry. So it's the potatoes that are the substance, that are the key element, the foundation. That's the substance. That's what's going to give me energy and fill me up. But then it's the spices or the oil or whatever it is that makes it tempting, that makes it tasty and makes it attractive. And it's the same thing in a marriage. We need to start with the base of respect, because that is really the substance of the marriage. But we also want the love to be there, because we want the marriage to be exciting and attractive, and we want to feel happy. Exactly. We want to have positive emotions involved in our marriage. And it's interesting because this is sort of a recurring theme, a common thread that we see throughout all the classes so far, that love is this potent, powerful emotion that can go either way. It can create the most beautiful things between a couple, or it could create the most miserable scenario. It could create tremendous hurt. So, as we've always been saying, we need something to guide that love, to give the love boundaries, so it's used in a way that it creates those beautiful benefits and not, God forbid, the disaster that it could create. And we spoke about that from many angles, and I think today we have a very practical way of looking at it. When we talk about the daily interaction between a husband and a wife, how do we guide, how do we set boundaries to our love? How do we temper that powerful potency of the love so that it's healthy and meaningful in our relationship? It's with something that's above us, a little bit beyond us, that is objective, which is, in this case, the respect. So it's no wonder that from the Torah's perspective, the key element in a marriage would be respect, that objective force that guides the love so it goes in a positive direction.
You know, what you're talking about is friendship. The deepest kind and the most powerful kind of friendship.
Mm-hmm. And that actually ties in beautifully with what we discussed last class, that the beauty of the Jewish system of marriage is we have built-in time for both. We have approximately 2 weeks a month where we have time to explore the element of love in the relationship and the passion and the fire. But at the same time, this is exactly what we said, we need to keep that love under control. We also have 2 weeks to implement another very important aspect of the marriage, which is you're saying, Rivka, is the friendship, and respect ties in beautifully with that. But of course, even the time when our marriage is perhaps more focused on the love, there has to be that respect that the love is sitting on.
Foundation.
The foundation, always. Okay, any questions so far?
I feel like with respect, it creates a place where both sides are equal, whereas the love, because it also fluctuates, but also just the nature of it, it creates the imbalance. The person who loves the other person is always kind of at the risk, more vulnerable position. Yeah, position of being taken advantage of, or giving too much of themselves, and then it can change. It doesn't need to be just one person, but.
It's true, and it's interesting because Maimonides actually says that respect is the first need for both the husband and the wife. So that's very true what you're saying. That makes it so important. So having identified the key ingredient in a marriage, which is the foundation, the respect, how do we implement this? Because I think at this point it sounds quite theoretical. It's a mindset, right? It's a mindset I have, an attitude I have towards my marriage that if I want my marriage to work, I need to respect my husband. But what does that mean, practically, respecting my husband? And this is where we get to, was it you, Rivka, who said that respect is doing? It was you who said that, right?
Giving, yeah.
Giving,
Yeah.
giving, doing for the other. Take a look at text 9. So what we have here is a passage from the Talmud explaining a biblical text where we find another relationship detailed in the Torah where respect is a requirement. Anybody know what relationship that is? The relationship with our parents. The Torah speaks about the relationship we need to have with our parents. The Torah says we must respect or honor our father and our mother.
Does it, I mean, I don't mean, we might not, but do we ever talk about the opposite? You know what I mean? Like a parent, what a parent should have for their kid?
Yes, I mean, there are all sorts of sources and places in the Torah where you could find amazing parenting advice. In fact, there's a course going on. I don't know if it started already or if it's starting shortly, starting this Wednesday, in a few locations in the city on parenting according to the Torah, which I'm sure is fascinating. But the element of honor and respect is not something necessarily that needs to be from the parents towards the children. That could be a little bit disastrous, I think. We see it today a lot.
Right.
The honor and the respect needs to be in the direction of from the children towards the parents. But definitely, it's not ignored. The other way around is not ignored in the Torah. So the Torah tells us we need to honor, respect our parents. You could ask the same question that we just asked regarding a spouse. How, on a practical level, do we honor or respect our parents? And the Talmud tells us. Would anybody like to read that? Text 9. Okay.
One is the practical definition of honor. Honor means to feed and provide drink, clothe, and cover, to lead in and out.
Okay, thank you. In other words, on a practical level, respect is being defined as identifying what our parents, or in this context, our spouse needs, and providing it, fulfilling that need, giving. In other words, again, displays of affection are beautiful and important in a marriage. But the meat and potatoes of a marriage is the respect, the providing for our spouse's needs, doing for our spouse, giving to our spouse. And not giving what I wouldn't need personally, necessarily. Not even giving what I think my spouse needs, but identifying what he needs, nothing to do with me, and providing that need. Now, having said that, it's not so simple, as I'm sure many of you have experienced. Men and women are wired very, very differently. And that is manifested in many ways. And one way is we have different needs. And it's very easy to fall into that pattern of thinking my husband's needs are the same as my needs and providing for my husband what I would like to be provided with. But that doesn't necessarily work. That's not respect. Respect means identifying his need. So how do we do that? How do we identify what our husbands need?
Ask.
We're not there. Okay, ask is one good way. Okay, good. Well, let's at least start somewhere before we get around to being able to ask what they need. But you know what? You have a very good point there, because sometimes, we just try and guess at it, when very simple. We just ask them and they're happy to tell us. So I'm going to keep that in mind. That's a good one. And in addition to that,
Watch and listen.
Mm-hmm. Observe, objectively. Yep. If you look at figure 4.1 on page 99, there's all kinds of ideas there from a compilation of sources, I believe, of differences between the needs of a man and the needs of a woman. Take a quick look at that and gives you some ideas, and perhaps you have something you would like to add to that. Anyone in particular that resonates with you, or something that you were thinking of that you don't see there that you'd like to add? Okay, you don't have to share. Maybe it's also personal because you find certain things in your marriage that resonate more. Just something to bear in mind. And what I'd like to do now is go back to the Rambam, go back to Maimonides, and see how he expressed the different needs between the husband and the wife. Because in the different instructions that he gives, he addresses those different needs. We didn't read the whole thing in the source, but there he elaborates a little bit on what he means when he tells the wife to honor the husband and what he means when he tells the husband to honor the wife. So let's start with the needs of a woman, which I'm sure we could identify with. The Rambam says that a husband must honor his wife more than he honors himself, as opposed to his next instruction where he says a husband should love his wife as he loves himself. When he mentions honor, which comes first, as we said on the chart, honor is number one, he says even more than the husband honors himself. In other words, above all, and we have many needs, but above all, our primary need as women, according to Rambam, and this actually meshes beautifully with a lot of the ideas we see here in figure 4.1, is that a woman needs to feel that she is her husband's first priority. He needs to honor her more than he honors himself. She is his priority, which means he considers her precious and cherishes her, in the sense that he respects her needs, appreciates her needs, and appreciates who she is as a person. We need to be appreciated for who we are, not what we give, not what we can provide, but for who we are as people. That's what the husband needs to know when he's told he needs to honor his wife. He needs to realize that the wife needs to feel like the top priority. Her needs are important, and she is a person in her own right and needs that to be respected. Now, what about a man's needs? Another interesting little exercise here in your student book on page 101. Here we have a list of what they call how a woman can shame a man without trying. So a list of different needs that a man needs to have provided for him. Does any of those especially resonate with you? Any of them sound a little familiar?
He gives me advice and I ignore it. It's true.
And this boils down to what you said as well, Rivka, about trust. When Maimonides tells a wife to honor or respect her husband, he elaborates on that by saying that above all, what a man needs is to have his opinion trusted, to feel competent, to feel capable, that his opinions and his decisions matter. They're not just dismissed and he shouldn't feel that his wife knows better all the time. A man needs to get that feeling from his wife, that she considers him really competent and trusts and respects his decisions and opinions. And again, you see this list here agrees very nicely with the approach of Rambam, came many generations before.
But what if the wife does not respect his decision or his opinion?
Well, that's why we have the class, because probably a lot of us do go through that, and what we have to remember is that that's his need. Now, having said that, we also, and there's many jokes about this, we also have the power to cultivate the potential within our husbands that their decisions should be sound. And I don't just mean, a decision that I prefer it another way, like, if my husband, this is really superficial, but if my husband is washing the dishes and he doesn't quite, or let's say like this, I send my husband to the grocery store and he buys the wrong brand of diapers or whatever. Very often we might tend to criticize that. What do you mean? Don't you know the diapers? Don't you ever change the baby's diapers? Don't you know the kind that we're supposed to have in the house? In a case like that, it's better to be silent so our husband doesn't feel we're always second guessing him. Now, I don't know if you're talking about decisions that are really fundamental decisions and could really impact a person's life in the wrong way. So in that case, we have to use our womanly intuition, which is a really true thing. Women have this. We have this intuition to know how to gently coax our family into doing the right thing. Because everyone has that potential for goodness within them. And it's our role, and we spoke about this actually in other years of classes, for those of you who are here, to develop and cultivate that in our husbands so that hopefully they are on the same page in terms of ethics and morals and making major decisions that is how we want our family or our home to be run.
But what if there's something major that comes up and in the wife's opinion, he made the wrong decision? She's just got to suck it up and buttercup.
I think it depends on what level we're talking about. These classes are all assuming we're talking about a regular, healthy relationship where there are going to be differences of opinions and ups and downs, and that's all normal, and hopefully they are able to work it out. There are, of course, times in a marriage, in a relationship, where the couple the issue might be too big for the couple and they would need to go to outside help. And this might be a case where they need someone more objective to guide them and help them in resolving that. So that might not be a case where the advice of this class is enough for. They might need some professional guidance.
So basically, when somebody buys the wrong thing for you at the grocery store, you don't say anything till the next time he goes and goes, make sure you buy this and this hamper and not pepper?
That's one way to solve it, yes?
Or you can always joke a little bit around it, like, okay, well, maybe we can try this, even though we know it didn't work. And
or we can maybe
way, like a different, softer way to just imply.
Right, our womanly intuition.
This one, but.
Or wait for a few days to pass, and then one day as you're changing the baby's diapers, say, by the way, I don't know if you found these diapers where you don't close as tightly. I usually buy the other ones. Because already a few days passed, so it's not like it's a direct critique of that particular shopping trip. You might have forgotten about it already. Right. So sometimes we just have to, try and bite our tongue because, of course, many times we do know the better way to do it. We run the house after all, right? In fact, there was a couple celebrating their 50th anniversary. And somebody asked them what their secret is. How do they have 50 beautiful years of marriage? And so the husband replies that when they first got married, they came to a mutual agreement that the husband will make all the major decisions, the big decisions, and the wife will make the small decisions. So therefore, says the husband, I give my opinion. I decide if the U.S. should go to war with Iran, if we should have economic relationships with China, and so on. And my wife decides which school we should send the kids to, how we should budget our money. and so on and so forth. So it's a joke, but I think we could all relate in a sense. I'd like to wrap up this class with the following anecdotes.
Boy, that
When,
Yeah.
yeah, it's an hour already, believe it or not.
might be an hour.
Well, we still have a little bit to finish up with, so we're not completely done yet. When the previous Chabad Rebbe, so the sixth Chabad Rebbe, Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, when he was a child, he asked his father, why, if God created us with one mouth and one nose, then why did he create us with two eyes? He's a little child. His father took his question very seriously and responded like this. He said, this is why we have two eyes. The right eye is to see the positive in everybody. And our left eye is to look at ourselves and see where we need to improve, where we need to grow. And I think this resonates very strongly in the context of marriage. We need to look at our spouse with our right eye. Not being in finding mode. Not always finding things to criticize. Finding things that he does wrong, making him second guessing and making him feel insecure. That's not looking at him with the right eye. Look at him with the right eye. It's in found mode. We accept him. We accept everything about him. And we focus on the positive in him. And we identify what he needs. And we make it our priority to fill those needs. That's with the right eye. And with my left eye, I look at myself. Because while I can't change my husband, I can change myself. And like we said at the beginning of class, the way we started, is that it's up to me to develop the right attitude to my marriage. It's up to me to implement techniques to improve my marriage. The success of my marriage is up to my growth and my working on myself and my self-improvement. So, yes, go ahead.
Rabbi Dabrowski used to teach us that when you look at somebody and you see a fault, what you're seeing is a fault in yourself,
Mm-hmm.
not in the other
Right,
person.
exactly. So, the same time we're looking at someone with one eye, the other eye needs to be turned inwards.
Absolutely.
Always need to have an eye on where we're holding. And so, when we talk about identifying the key element to a successful marriage, it really boils down to looking at our spouse with the right eye. That we look at him and his good qualities objectively, with respect. Respect the way he thinks, respect the way he needs things done, and try our best to build our marriage on that foundation. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead, Sue.
I have another question.
No, don't apologize.
To respect him, of course, but what in the case, sorry, I always think of all these scenarios, right, where the woman is, she's always giving in to him because she respects him, whatever he wants, whatever he says, we do whatever he wants, where she's kind of lost it,
Right. Well, it's definitely not the goal for the wife to become,
No.
as we say in Yiddish, a schmate. In other words, to be the doormat. It's definitely not. That's not a healthy marriage, and it's not going to be a happy and successful marriage.
No. As
So,
long as she doesn't slip into that.
exactly.
Yeah.
Well, look, Maimonides gave instructions to the husband too, and I always say husbands need classes too. But this is the class for us, because it's also easy to fall into a pattern the other way around, that we always blame our husband for the problems in the marriage. And what we're saying tonight is we have our own responsibility towards the marriage. Our husbands also have a responsibility towards the marriage. That is for sure. And if that's not happening, again, that might be a case that outside help may be needed. You never know. But in terms of, I can only fix and work on what I could contribute to the marriage and how I can improve the marriage. And that's the first step. If the marriage remains at that level where it's only me taking steps to improve the marriage and it's not a two-way street, it's not reciprocated, that could be a problem. And of course, the couple will need to deal with that in a way that works.
I have a question. In regards of Maimonides' chart of what women and men need out of their spouses. Now, he mentions women don't need maybe that much. Let's say men towards women, they don't need, how can I say? Love is not an essential element, let's say.
For the husband.
For the husband
need.
to, is that for the husband to give the wife?
No.
It's the opposite. For the wife, in other words, it's not the
So
first
husband towards
primary need
wife.
of the husband.
So husband towards wife, he's not talking about love. It's not an element. right?
Husband towards wife, yes. A wife needs love. She needs respect first as the foundation, but she also needs, the husband has to be told to give his wife love.
Okay.
Whereas when we talk about the wife towards the husband, it's not necessarily the husband doesn't need love. Of course the husband needs love. But I think it's like what Ayala said before, that we don't need to be instructed to give the love. What we need to be instructed is to give respect and to give reverence or admiration, make the husband feel, as the Rambam actually says, to feel like he's a king. Not that we should become the doormat, but we should make him feel good about himself. Husbands
Love
need
will
that.
come naturally.
And love will come more naturally.
And is that the same aspect that he sees reverence? Will it come naturally then?
From the husband towards the wife?
Yeah.
I think it's simply not so much a need of a woman. I think if a woman feels respected and she feels loved, her needs are being met. We don't, I mean, everyone's different. You can't really make, a formula across the board. All women are like this and all men are like that. It doesn't work that way. But in general, I would say a woman doesn't necessarily need to be admired by her husband. It's not really what we want. It's more to be respected for who we are, that our husband should see me for me and cherish that.
Okay, well then I guess it could link together. Like if we get the respect and the love, I guess the admiration then will come naturally.
It could, but even if not, it's not necessarily something that we look for. In other words, a man needs to feel a bit on a pedestal maybe,
Right.
has that need.
Right.
That the wife should admire him and find him super capable. Whereas a woman needs to feel appreciated for what she does, but not necessarily on a pedestal, although it's nice, and that could fall into the category of love and respect too, like you're saying. But as a specific need separate from respect and love, in general, it's not really a primary need.
Okay.
But there's nothing wrong with it, and of course we would love it if we were always put on a
I get
pedestal.
it, well, of course.
Right. But does that answer your question?
Yeah, it
Yeah?
So
Okay.
what comes naturally to men and one man?
I think, well, men aren't as emotionally plugged in necessarily. So once men are made to understand what, because don't forget, we're like a whole alien creation for a man. Like we're so different than them, right? And it goes the other way around as well. But somehow women we're tuned into emotions. We're a little bit intuitive, so we may be able to figure out a little bit better on our own. And men are not built like that. They're just simply not created like that. Some are, but a lot aren't. And that's why they're told. Now, once they're told, they could definitely implement this. There's nothing wrong with them that they can't do it. But sometimes they just need to be reminded this is what their wife needs. And once they have that reminder, they're perfectly capable of implementing it, generally speaking, unless there's a deeper problem. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Bit.
A bit. Yeah, there's no easy answer to that. And every relationship is different. And while this is general advice for a marriage, of course, I think every couple needs to customize it to their particular relationship, to what works for them. Everyone's different. Every man is unique amongst men, and every woman is unique amongst women. So, but this is a good place to start.
I guess I was wondering, would you say that men are naturally admiring the women? Like, is it just something that comes naturally and that's why they're not instructed, or they're not instructed because it's not important to us?
It may be a mix, but I'm not sure exactly what the answer, but I would say this, that I think if we would say that it comes naturally for a husband to admire his wife, I think we would call that by a different term. I think we might call that objectify. And I don't think we would like that.
No.
So I don't think that's something that we're looking for. It may come naturally to a man, but that's definitely not what we're looking for, and it's definitely not the instructions of the Rambam towards a marriage. In fact, what we do want and what the Rambam does instruct is the exact opposite of this. The Rambam tells the husband, appreciate your wife for who she is. Don't objectify her. She's a person. She has thoughts. She has feelings. Respect that. Appreciate that about her. Anything else? Feel free. This is the time for discussion, so don't be shy or embarrassed to bring up any points. They're all good. In the meantime, feel free afterwards to bring anything up. But for those of you that have the book, there's a very interesting take-home exercise, if you'd like. You can try it for yourself at home. I recommend it. And just want to let everyone know that the next class is February 1st, so 2 weeks from tonight. And the topic is becoming a better half. Tonight was respecting your other half. And the next step is becoming a better half, and basically how to deal, and maybe this will answer some of your questions, Sue, how to deal with some of the challenges that sometimes, the normal challenges that come up in a marriage. And this can be on many levels. This could be in terms of always comparing one spouse to the spouse of others. It's not quite measuring up. He doesn't do what my friend's husband does. He doesn't wash the dishes, and he does, or whatever it is, always comparing. It could be a constant critique, being constantly judgmental of one's spouse, never finding that he is meeting your needs, meeting your expectations. Still on the look, still on the search for that elusive, perfect husband. And of course, this indicates a real lack of commitment to the marriage, because you still haven't accepted him completely. That's do you find, or are you finding? Are you in finding mode in your marriage? As opposed to, have you found somebody who approaches their marriage from that perspective? They're in found mode. They finish their search. She accepts her husband for who she is. That's it. She married him. She's committed to him. She'll take the whole package, good and bad together. That's it. That's who her husband is. She accepts him. She's committed to him no matter what. There's no more looking back. Well, what if? Not like this one, not like that one, could be better. There's no more looking back. There's only looking forward. Now imagine someone in finding mode looking to improve their marriage versus someone in found mode looking to improve their marriage. Someone who's in finding mode probably won't have too much success improving their marriage, and that's why the Talmud tells us if your marriage is going to take on the look of finding, it will be miserable. You'll never be happy. And anything you try, if you're coming from a place of criticism and negativity, it's probably not going to work. But if you're in found mode in your marriage, if you are approaching your marriage from the place of, I have already found, then you're ready to move on, to look forward, to begin to build a thriving, flourishing marriage. And that is a happy marriage, a contented marriage. Welcome, everybody. Nice to see you all. Tonight, in tonight's class, we're going to continue our series on soulmates, on what makes a Jewish marriage. And the topic that we will explore tonight is, what is that key ingredient that makes for a successful marriage? Now, of course, there are countless books written on this topic. There are many, many opinions. Everyone could say what they believe the key ingredient is in a successful marriage. But we will explore this question from Judaism's perspective. And as we mentioned in the beginning of the series, that when we explore an issue from the Torah perspective, we're gaining insight from the one who created men and women in the first place and know us best. So what does Judaism, what does God tell us is the key ingredient to marriage? What will make men and women live together in the most successful way? And once we identify this key element, we'll speak about how to implement that in our marriage and how to work on our marriage from that perspective. But we're not quite ready to begin yet. Before we begin to explore how to improve a marriage, we need to make sure that we have the right approach, the right attitude. Because if we are missing the right approach to our marriage, it will be very difficult to successfully implement change. So to begin with, I'd like you to please turn to text 1A on page 89. Perhaps those that don't have books could just share with someone next to them. Maybe we might even have to rearrange seats a bit. I don't know, whatever works best. Now, text 1A is a quote from the Talmud. So before we begin to explore what that key ingredient to successful marriage is, and before we begin to discuss how to implement that, we have to be clear on two things first. That if we are sometimes find ourselves, which, you know, we're human and we probably have our finding days and our found days, but we should just know that if we are in finding mode, it's not the time to try and work on a marriage. There's really nothing to talk about. You're not likely to be too successful. If we are in found mode, however, then it's time to begin. That's number one. Number one is to be aware there's two ways to approach and determine we have the right one. The second point we need to clarify before we begin is, now that we know the right attitude to have, we need to constantly assess if we have that attitude. In other words, the question the Talmud is speaking about, or the declaration that's presented to a groom, have you found or do you find? This is a question we need to ask ourselves every single day. Am I in finding mode or am I in found mode? Because the success of my marriage depends on my attitude. And with that, we can begin to explore how to improve our marriage. So, what would you say is the key ingredient to a successful marriage?
Respect.
Respect. Beautiful. Do you want to elaborate on that a bit or leave it at that?
Well, to me, respect would just sort of be like the groundwork, you know what I mean? To me, if you don't have that, you don't really have a lot. I mean, out of that comes, in my opinion, trust and all those things.
Okay, beautifully said, and we are definitely going to elaborate on that. Good.
I think along the same lines, like accepting each other for who you are. Obviously, like ideally, like more than accepting, but I think just like a basic foundation of like, I accept you for everything that you are. And not wanting to change each other.
Okay, beautiful. And that ties in actually very nicely with what Sue mentioned, and we're going to discuss that as well. Okay, so we have respect, acceptance. Any other thoughts?
Communication.
Communication. Very important. Good. Commitment. Yes, it's pretty essential. 100%. Okay, tonight we're actually going to address this question according to Maimonides, the Rambam. And if you're wondering why we're choosing Maimonides out of all the Torah scholars through the ages, it's actually very interesting because Maimonides, amongst the many books that he authored, he put together a series of 14 books called the Mishneh Torah. And the Mishneh Torah encompasses every facet of Jewish life and every aspect of Jewish law. And what the Rambam did, what Maimonides did, was he compiled all the sources from our oral tradition. So all the sources from the Mishnah, from the Talmud, from the Midrash, and all the different commentaries on the Talmud and on the Midrash, etc., etc. All that preceded him. He synthesized all that wisdom into his 14 volumes of the Mishneh Torah. So in the section of his book where he speaks about marriage, really that is a synthesis of all the marriage advice found in the Mishnah and the Talmud and in the Midrash and in all the different sources that came before Maimonides. So instead of us having to sift through each source, it makes sense to open up the Mishneh Torah, the book of Maimonides, where he has already done that work for us, so to speak, and compiled all that wisdom. So we are going to start with that source, with the text from Maimonides, and discover what kind of advice he gives to have a successful marriage. So take a look in your books, please, on page 90. You have a little exercise there. You have a chart. And on this chart across the top, you have 3 different ingredients that Maimonides discusses is important in a marriage. And along the side, we have we have those 3 ingredients in the context of a husband behaving. And it is what seems like a question posed to a groom on his wedding day. And it goes like this. In Israel, when a man married a woman, they would tell him, matzah or motzeh, which means, have you found or do you find? Now, what is that supposed to mean exactly? He's about to get married. It's his wedding day. And this is the question posed to him. Have you found or do you find? Found what? Find what? What is being asked here? Now, the truth is, if we look a little bit closer, he's not being asked something. He's being told something. Because in fact, matzah and motzeh, have you found or do you find, are really code words, code terms, so to speak, for 2 possible scenarios, 2 possible pictures his upcoming marriage may look like. His marriage might take on the form of, have you found? Or it might take on what's represented in the term, do you find? What are those 2 scenarios? So the Talmud goes on to explain that have you found is a reference to a happy, contented marriage. Do you find is a reference to a marriage that, as the Talmud quotes from King Solomon, describes it as more bitter than death. So pretty miserable. Now, why do those terms refer to those 2 specific scenarios? Somebody who is in finding mode in their marriage, when they get married or throughout the marriage, means that they never truly completed their search for their spouse. She is still not completely satisfied with who her spouse is. So she's still finding